Famous college myths of all time. It is not certain how and when it actually started, but it has made its way into American universities. For decades now, it has created panic and fear among thousands of students, and possibly even a few professors as well. The legend goes that a popular psychic has made a prediction that on a Halloween night a masked man will enter the campus of the university that starts with the letter M or W and is located near a pond, lake, river, railroad track or cemetery. He will then kill everyone there. This story has existed for many years now, but no massacre has happened yet. However, students from all around the country still fear it.
Another grim college legend, which is repeated across many dorm rooms, is the one about the dead roommate. No one knows where it started or whether it has any basis in true events, but rumor has it that if a student roommate in college dies by accident, illness or suicide, she or he will get only straight A's until the end of the year. This, of course, is a complete fabrication. Those students might receive some consideration for the stressful circumstances, but they will most definitely not automatically get only excellent grades.
Many universities around the world have some sort of statues or monuments in front of their building. It might be a statue of the creator, benefactor, alumnus or an abstract symbol. A popular myth is that at night those statues come to life and move around the campus. The legend varies from institution to institution, but that pattern is the same. Some colleges might even have monuments of animals or different types of fantastic creatures. The University of Cincinnati, for example, has stone lions in front of its Mcveigh Hall, which some students believe they heard growl at night. Some variations of the legend say that the statues only move when a virgin or cheater walks past them. Others go even further and describe paintings and other objects coming to life as well. Students from Michigan State University, for instance, claim that the portrait of Mary Mayer moves its eyes and follows you through the room.
Lots of universities in the world are believed to have secret tunnels below their campuses. Through the years, students have made up various stories concerning hidden pathways leading to dungeons, ritual rooms and so on. The legend is again particularly popular in the U.S. Students from Michigan State University believe that there are creepy dungeons below the university. That is partially true because there are tunnels running under the campus, but they are actually steam tunnels that were built to house campus utilities. No dungeons whatsoever have been found. Another version of the same belief exists at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where some students there believe there is a secret room below the foreign language building and that it holds a supercomputer, which is owned by the government. They also claim that there are secret tunnels below the buildings on the quad, whose origins and purpose are unknown.
Arguably the most popular college urban legends are about haunted universities. Almost every university in the world which is more than 100 years old has its own ghost. While some students proudly brag about that and make up all kinds of scary stories of ghostly encounters, there are some who are genuinely afraid. Even though different colleges have different legends concerning ghosts, the main patterns are very similar. There can only be so many types of ghosts, right? Ones to watch out for include Headless Ghosts. Probably initially inspired by Washington Irving's Sleepy Hollow, legends about headless or bodiless ghosts are some of the most popular ones in stories of haunted universities. The most prestigious universities in the UK Cambridge and Oxford, both have similar hauntings, which include famous Brits. Students in Cambridge believe they have seen the floating head of none other than Oliver Cromwell himself. He was beheaded and while his body was buried, his head rests at Cambridge's Sidney Sussex College. It is said that Cromwell haunts the campus grounds, supposedly searching for the rest of his body. Oxford, on the other hand, is said to be haunted by the headless spirit of King Charles I. Students have reported seeing him around the grounds of Christ Church College. Ghosts of former professors. Another famous urban legend, spread around many colleges around the world, is about ghosts of former university professors. Such a legend exists at Heidelberg University in Germany, for example. During the Nazi era, many communists of Jewish professors at the university were sent to concentration camps. Lots of them have apparently returned to their old workplace to haunt its grounds for eternity. While students haven't actually seen them, they have reported that the chalkboards in these professors' old lecture halls self-erase, or have mysterious words written on them. A similar urban legend exists in the American University of Cincinnati. According to students and staff there, the ghost of a former classics professor who died in the 1960s haunts the Bleg and Rare book room. Students claim that they constantly feel like someone is watching them and keep hearing strange noises at night. Ghosts of students who committed suicide. Possibly the most widespread versions of the ghost legends are those concerning students who committed suicide on campus grounds. I guess there is something eerie about suicidal students indeed, but most stories aren't based on actual evidence. Supposedly, in the beginning of the 20th century, a young girl took her own life by drowning in a swimming pool at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. The girl had just found out she was pregnant and in her panic committed suicide. Students believe that her spirit still roams the English building of the university. Another similar myth exists at the Emmanuel College in Cambridge. A student who hanged himself many years ago apparently walks the corridors of the building.
The story of this urban legend, you may have never heard of it, but then again it is possible that you may have. The creature that I saw that night, I will never forget myself. It was horrific, and what it did to me and my friends that night was beyond nightmares. As a matter of fact, I still have those nightmares to this day, years later. I will tell you all my story of what I saw that night and how I am still running from this creature even to this day. You see, I and my mates were in our early adult ages and living in a small town of only a few thousand people. Well, you can see that things can get boring very quickly. There wasn't much for us young people to do. Living in this town, I would say, this village was more of a retirement village for the elderly. There were several cafes, a cinema that only played vintage films, a shopping center, and then about a dozen second-hand shops. I don't know why, but these second-hand shops do seem to be popular with the elderly. However, a few miles outside of town, there was a sort of mall that sat between two towns, our town and the next town, which was larger than ours by, I would say, about 20,000. I and my mates would go to the mall to hang out and meet up with our girlfriends. That is all we could do these days. One day we were that bored, we couldn't even go to the mall. That was how bored we were. All day we threw off things we could do, play knock-a-door run, couldn't be bothered, DP people's house, no, couldn't do that either. This went on for several days, just sitting in the backyard, drinking a beer or two and having a barbecue, nothing much more we could do. There was the odd day that we would go round to our mate's house who had a pool. That was nice on those hot days, but it did get old very fast. One day while we were sunbathing by the pool, still thinking about things to do, my mate, let's call him Dave, told us about a website. He came across a website that told about abandoned places in our area. I had to admit this caught my attention. He told us about a sawmill that was abandoned in the woods about 10 miles outside of town due west of here. However, there was also an old hospital about 5 miles north that we could also visit too. Now that everyone's interest was piqued, the only thing left to do was to decide on which place we wanted to go and visit. We talked it out and decided that an old hospital would have been the same old thing. There would be beds, chairs, and also ghosts. The sawmill, however, That would be very interesting. I mean, how often do you see an old sawmill? After talking it over for a few hours, we decided to go to the sawmill. It would seem to be more interesting. However, we wouldn't leave out the old hospital either. We would go and visit that place a few days later. We also talked for a few hours more after we decided on the location, as now we need to know what time we wanted to go and also who was going to take who, as there were about 8 of us and only 2 of us could drive, including me. There was 8 of us shared between 2 cars. That would mean 4 people in each car. We would also collect $5 from each of us for gas. That would mean neither of the 2 cars would run out and break down on the way there or back. We decided to go at the weekend as some of us do work, and in this time and day we need the money to pay our bills. This way, we should all be available to go. We also decided to go near night time. We didn't want anyone to spot us being there if there was anyone patrolling the area. So now we are on a Friday, but before we set off on our quest, we all decided to meet up at ours for a few hours and have a barbecue as the weather was lovely, and also to make sure our bellies were full for the ride there and back. We sat around the table eating, chatting and overall having a laugh about what we think could happen, maybe seeing a bear or getting caught by a guard or police. We would never know what fate awaited us that night. After a few hours, the sun started to set. We got together our stuff, which comprised of water bottles, cameras, and torches. We were also preparing for a hike, but we also wanted to record our trip there too. We all got into our designated cars and started our journey there. It was about 10 miles to the sawmill and would took about 40 minutes to get there. Not too bad of a drive really, I guess. During the drive up there, we were a bit shocked as we did see another building is dismay along the route. There were too many abandoned buildings and we were now getting a little worried. I mean, why is there so many? However, at least it would keep us busy for a few weeks just checking out these buildings. Maybe we could also do a paranormal ghost hunt just to see what is there. You never know. There is a reason why there are so many that are abandoned. After a few miles, we were now in the country. No more buildings ahead of us except for the sawmill. All we could see are trees and fields ahead of us. We were all getting more and more excited, to say the least. After a further 20 minutes, we are now at the sawmill. However, we would have to park at the car park and hike about 2 miles further to the mill. We didn't mind. We all work out and we were all fit for the walk. Walking along the trail, you can see that no one has been here for a long time. We had to push aside branches just so we could get past. I could tell that this could take us a few hours to get there from how thick the vegetation now is. After a crawling few hours, pushing past thick branches and kicking aside weeds, we are now at the sawmill. It was so overgrown, you could tell nature was now taking back the land she had once lost back when they were operational. When we got to the sawmill, it was now dark and had to get out our flashlights out just to see around us. This was scary as we could see shadows around us. We just put this down to the trees moving around in the area. In videos you see on YouTube, you would see people who would separate from their group. However, we didn't do that. We knew that if we did, then someone could get hurt and maybe not be able to call for help, so we all stuck together just in case. Looking around the area, you could see how creepy it was around here. There was no light as the trees in the area covered the light from the moon. The only light around here was the light from our flashlights. What we all heard next had us all stunned. Looking around the group, everyone's face was as white as a ghost. The sound we all heard sounded like one of those old World War sirens from back in the day. We all looked around, looking for that sound that we heard. We couldn't see anything around us. Even with the flashlights, we couldn't see anything. We were all now nervous at what we heard but can't see. We didn't get a break after what we heard, as straight after we heard someone talking over a loudspeaker. At the time, we all thought that we got caught and there was someone approaching us. We all waited to see who it was, however, no one showed, and now we are all getting scared. Next, the talking stopped and now weird noises just started calling out over this loudspeaker. We are all now looking around us, but still, there is nothing that can be seen. We all looked at each other and without saying anything, we all decided to make our way back to the car, but this time, the noise was getting louder, a sign that whatever it was not approaching us. We didn't want to be in the area to find out what it was. We all gather and start heading back. We keep out cameras trained on the trail ahead of us. Our cameras have night vision, and because of that, it would pick things up that we would not be able to see otherwise. We are about a quarter of the way back to our cars when one of the guys ahead of us halted with a real bad look on his face. "What up?" we asked him. However, he could not speak but instead, lifted his shaking arm and pointed to the trees ahead of us. Looking to where we were pointed, we could not see anything. "There is nothing there," we told him, but he just kept pointing as we continued to look ahead. He then pointed his camera ahead of us and raised it so we all could see the screen. Looking at the screen of this camera, we couldn't believe what we could see. The sound now loud as ever, and in front, you could see what looked like a tree moving around. Whatever this creature was, it was massive. The body of this creature went way above the tree line. I pointed the camera up following the silhouette of the creature until I could see the head of the creature. What now scared me, there was no head but instead, two loudspeakers facing opposite, both with teeth. We are all now really scared for ourselves and now pondering on to get out of here. Making things worse, this creature knew exactly where we were and was approaching us fast. I looked to the other and told them to turn off their lights and use the night vision on the cameras to get down the trail. This, however, was no use, because he had such long legs. He managed to get ahead of us. I also reckon he could also see us too. Then we heard a blood-curdling scream as one of our mates was grabbed from our pack and just shoved into the mouth of the creature. At that moment, we all knew how bad things were. We all just starting running towards our car, but it was no use. Another scream, and another mate eaten by this creature. It seemed that it was no good. No matter how fast we ran, this creature was still with us. By the time we got to our car, 4 of our mates was now gone, eaten by this creature. Just as I opened all the doors, the creature grabbed another mate. The sound you hear of bone being crunched by teeth is not something you want to hear. 3 of us now left, 3 of us in the car. I put the car into reverse and just peel out of there. I must have broken the speed limit to get back into town, just to get away from the creature. However, running was useless. It followed us. Yes, followed us. We could see it behind us running after the car, speeding down the road, and this creature could keep us with a speeding car. I thought about losing the creature by taking side roads, and at some point, I must have lost it as I could not see it anymore. As soon as I knew I lost it, I went straight home. My mates got out and they all went home too. Now back at my own house, I sit in my bedroom now crying at the loss of my other mates, that is until another of my mate ring me. Upon picking up the phone, he tells me it is no good, it knows we live. "What do you mean?" I asked just before the phone dies. Now knowing what my mate said, I quickly pack some stuff and head out. I didn't care about where I went, just as long as I am one step ahead of this creature, but just as my mate said, it is no use, he knows where we are, and he will come for me. All I have to do is keep one step ahead of it.
Timothy James Mcveigh, April 23, 1968, June 11, 2001, was an American domestic terrorist who carried out the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing that killed 168 people and injured more than 680 others and destroyed one-third of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. The bombing was the second deadliest act of terrorism in the United States other than the Tulsa Race Massacre prior to the September 11 attacks. It remains one of the deadliest acts of domestic terrorism in U.S. history. A Gulf War veteran, Mcveigh sought revenge against the federal government for the 1993 Waco siege that ended in the deaths of 86 people, many of whom were children, as well as the 1992 Ruby Ridge incident and American foreign policy. He hoped to inspire a revolution against the federal government and defended the bombing as a legitimate tactic against what he saw as tyrannical government. He was arrested shortly after the bombing and indicted on 160 state offenses and 11 federal offenses, including the use of a weapon of mass destruction. He was found guilty on all counts in 1997 and sentenced to death. Mcveigh was executed by lethal injection on June 11, 2001, at the Federal Correctional Complex in Terre Haute, Indiana. His execution was carried out in a considerably shorter time than most inmates awaiting the death penalty. Terry Nichols and Michael Fortier were convicted as conspirators in the plot. Nichols was sentenced to 8 life terms for the deaths of 8 federal agents, and to 161 life terms without parole by the state of Oklahoma for the deaths of the others. Michael Fortier was sentenced to 12 years imprisonment and has since been released. Lori Fortier was given immunity in exchange for her testimony against the others. Mcveigh was born on April 23, 1968, in Lockport, New York, the only son and the second of 3 children of Irish-Americans Mildred Mickey Noreen, née Hill, and William Mcveigh. In 1866, Mcveigh's great-great-grandfather Edward Mcveigh emigrated from Ireland and settled in Niagara County. After their parents divorced when Mcveigh was 10 years old, he was raised by his father in Pendleton, New York. Mcveigh claimed to have been a target of bullying at school, and he took refuge in a fantasy world where he imagined retaliating against the bullies. At the end of his life, he stated his belief that the United States government is the ultimate bully. Most who knew Mcveigh remember him as being very shy and withdrawn, while a few described him as an outgoing and playful child who withdrew as an adolescent. He is said to have had only one girlfriend as an adolescent. He later told journalists that he did not have any idea how to impress girls. While in high school, Mcveigh became interested in computers and hacked into government computer systems on his Commodore 64 under the handle The Wanderer, taken from the song by Dion DiMucci. In his senior year, he was named most promising computer programmer of Star Point Central High School but had relatively poor grades until his 1986 graduation. He was introduced to firearms by his grandfather. Mcveigh told people of his wish to become a gun shop owner, and sometimes took firearms to school to impress his classmates. He became intensely interested in gun rights as well as the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution after he graduated from high school, and read magazines such as Soldier of Fortune. He briefly attended Bryant and Stratton College before dropping out. After dropping out of college, Mcveigh worked as an armored car guard and was noted by co-workers as being obsessed with guns. One co-worker recalled an instance when Mcveigh came to work looking like Pancho Villa as he was wearing bandoliers. In May 1988, at the age of 20, Mcveigh enlisted in the United States Army and attended basic training and advanced individual training at the U.S. Army Infantry School at Fort Benning, Georgia. While in the military, Mcveigh used much of his spare time to read about firearms, sniper tactics, and explosives. Mcveigh was reprimanded by the military for purchasing a white power t-shirt at a Ku Klux Klan protest. They were objecting to black servicemen who wore black power t-shirts around a military installation, primarily Army. Mcveigh was a top-scoring gunner with the 25mm cannon of the Bradley fighting vehicles used by the 1st Infantry Division and was promoted to sergeant. After being promoted, Mcveigh earned a reputation for assigning undesirable work to black servicemen and using racial slurs. He was stationed at Fort Riley, Kansas, before being deployed on Operation Desert Storm. In an interview before his execution, Mcveigh said that he decapitated an Iraqi soldier with cannon fire on his first day in the war and celebrated. He said he was later shocked to be ordered to execute surrendering prisoners and to see carnage on the road while leaving Kuwait City after U.S. troops routed the Iraqi army. Mcveigh received several service awards, including the Bronze Star Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Southwest Asia Service Medal, Army Service Ribbon, and the Kuwaiti Liberation Medal. Mcveigh aspired to join the United States Army Special Forces, SF. After returning from the Gulf War, he entered the selection program but washed out on the second day of the 21-day assessment and selection course for the Special Forces. Mcveigh decided to leave the Army and was honorably discharged in 1991. Post-military life. Mcveigh wrote letters to local newspapers complaining about taxes. Taxes are a joke. Regardless of what a political candidate promises, they will increase. More taxes are always the answer to government mismanagement. They mess up. We suffer. Taxes are reaching cataclysmic levels, with no slowdown in sight. Is a civil war imminent? Do we have to shed blood to reform the current system? I hope it doesn't come to that. But it might. Mcveigh also wrote to Representative John J. LaFalce, D. New York, complaining about the arrest of a woman for carrying mace. It is a lie if we tell ourselves that the police can protect us everywhere at all times. Firearms restrictions are bad enough, but now a woman can't even carry mace in her purse. While visiting friends in Decker, Michigan, Mcveigh reportedly complained that the Army had implanted a microchip into his buttocks so that the government could keep track of him. Mcveigh worked long hours in a dead-end job and felt that he did not have a home. He sought romance, but his advances were rejected by a co-worker and he felt nervous around women. He believed that he brought too much pain to his loved ones. He grew angry and frustrated at his difficulties in finding a girlfriend. He took up obsessive gambling. Unable to pay gambling debts, he took a cash advance and then defaulted on his repayments. He began looking for a state so that he could live without heavy government regulation or high taxes. He became enraged when the government told him that he had been overpaid $1,058 while in the Army and he had to pay back the money. He wrote an angry letter to the government, saying, "Go ahead, take everything I own, take my dignity. Feel good as you grow fat and rich at my expense, sucking my tax dollars and property." Mcveigh introduced his sister to anti-government literature, but his father had little interest in these views. He moved out of his father's house and into an apartment that had no telephone. This made it impossible for his employer to contact him for overtime assignments. He quit the National Rifle Association, NRA, believing that it was too weak on gun rights. In 1993, Mcveigh drove to Waco, Texas, during the Waco siege to show his support. At the scene, he distributed pro-gun rights literature and bumper stickers bearing slogans such as, "When guns are outlawed, I will become an outlaw." He told a student reporter, "The government is afraid of the guns people have because they have to have control of the people at all times. Once you take away the guns, you can do anything to the people. You give them an inch and they take a mile. I believe we are slowly turning into a socialist government. The government is continually growing bigger and more powerful, and the people need to prepare to defend themselves against government control." For the 5 months following the Waco siege, Mcveigh worked at gun shows and handed out free cards printed with Lon Horiuchi's name and address, in the hope that somebody in the Patriot movement would assassinate the sharpshooter. Horiuchi is an FBI sniper and some of his official actions have drawn controversy, specifically his shooting and killing of Randy Weaver's wife while she held an infant child. Mcveigh wrote hate mail to Horiuchi, suggesting that what goes around, comes around. Mcveigh later considered putting aside his plan to target the Murrah building to target Horiuchi or a member of his family instead. Mcveigh became a fixture on the gun show circuit, traveling to 40 states and visiting about 80 gun shows. He found that the further west he went, the more anti-government sentiment he encountered, at least until he got to what he called the People's Socialist Republic of California. Mcveigh sold survival items and copies of the Turner Diaries. One author said, "In the gun show culture, Mcveigh found a home. Though he remained skeptical of some of the most extreme ideas being bandied around, he liked talking to people there about the United Nations, the federal government, and possible threats to American liberty." Mcveigh had a road atlas with hand-drawn designations of the most likely places for nuclear attacks and considered buying property in Seligman, Arizona, which he determined to be in a nuclear-free zone. He lived with Michael Fortier in Kingman, Arizona, and the two became so close that he served as best man at Fortier's wedding. Mcveigh experimented with cannabis and methamphetamine after first researching their effects in an encyclopedia. He was never as interested in drugs as Fortier was, and one of the reasons they parted ways was Mcveigh's getting tired of Fortier's drug habits. In April 1993, Mcveigh headed for a farm in Michigan where former roommate Terry Nichols lived. In between watching coverage of the Waco siege on TV, Nichols and his brother began teaching Mcveigh how to make explosives by combining household chemicals in plastic jugs. The destruction of the Waco compound enraged Mcveigh and convinced him that it was time to take action. He was particularly angered by the government's use of CS gas on women and children. He had been exposed to the gas as part of his military training and was familiar with its effects. The disappearance of certain evidence, such as the bullet-riddled steel-reinforced front door to the complex, led him to suspect a cover-up. Mcveigh's anti-government rhetoric became more radical. He began to sell Bureau of Alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives, ATF, hats riddled with bullet holes, and a flare gun that he said could shoot down an ATF helicopter. He produced videos detailing the government's actions at Waco and handed out pamphlets with titles such as U.S. Government Initiates Open Warfare Against American People and Waco Shootout Evokes Memory of Warsaw 43. He began changing his answering machine greeting every couple of weeks to various quotes by Patrick Henry, such as "Give me liberty or give me death." He began experimenting with making pipe bombs and other small explosive devices. The government imposed new firearms restrictions in 1994 which Mcveigh believed threatened his livelihood. Mcveigh dissociated himself from his boyhood friend Steve Hodge by sending him a 23-page farewell letter. He proclaimed his devotion to the United States Declaration of Independence, explaining in detail what each sentence meant to him. Mcveigh declared that those who betray or subvert the Constitution are guilty of sedition and/or treason, are domestic enemies, and should and will be punished accordingly. It also stands to reason that anyone who sympathizes with the enemy or gives aid or comfort to said enemy is likewise guilty. I have sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I will. And I will because not only did I swear to, but I believe in what it stands for in every bit of my heart, soul, and being. I know in my heart that I am right in my struggle, Steve. I have come to peace with myself, my God, and my cause. Blood will flow in the streets, Steve. Good versus evil. Free men versus socialist wannabe slaves. Pray it is not your blood, my friend. Mcveigh felt the need to personally reconnoiter sites of rumored conspiracies. He visited Area 51 in order to defy government restrictions on photography and went to Gulfport, Mississippi, to determine the veracity of rumors about United Nations operations. These turned out to be false. The Russian vehicles on the site were being configured for use in UN-sponsored humanitarian aid efforts. Around this time, Mcveigh and Nichols began making bulk purchases of ammonium nitrate, an agricultural fertilizer, for resale to survivalists, since rumors were circulating that the government was preparing to ban it. Mcveigh told Fortier of his plans to blow up a federal building, but Fortier declined to participate. Fortier also told his wife about the plans. Mcveigh composed 2 letters to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the first titled Constitutional Defenders and the second ATF Read. He denounced government officials as fascist tyrants and stormtroopers, and warned, "ATF, all you tyrannical motherfuckers will swing in the wind one day for your treasonous actions against the Constitution of the United States. Remember the Nuremberg war trials." Mcveigh also wrote a letter to recruit a customer named Steve Colbring. A man with nothing left to lose is a very dangerous man, and his anger can be focused toward a common, righteous goal. What I'm asking you to do, then, is sit back and be honest with yourself. Do you have kids, a wife? Would you back out at the last minute to care for the family? Are you interested in keeping your firearms for their current, future monetary value, or would you drag the 06 through rock, swamp, and cactus to get off the needed shot? In short, I'm not looking for talkers, I'm looking for fighters. And if you are a Fed, think twice. Think twice about the Constitution you are supposedly enforcing. Isn't enforcing freedom an oxymoron? And think twice about catching us with our guard down. You will lose just like Deegan did, and your family will lose. Mcveigh began announcing that he had progressed from the propaganda phase to the action phase. He wrote to his Michigan friend Gwenda Strider, "I have certain other militant talents that are in short supply and greatly demanded." Mcveigh later said he considered a campaign of individual assassination, with eligible targets including Attorney General Janet Reno, Judge Walter S. Smith Jr. of Federal District Court, who handled the Branch Davidian trial, and Lon Horiuchi, a member of the FBI hostage rescue team, who shot and killed Vicki Weaver in a standoff at a remote cabin at Ruby Ridge, Idaho, in 1992. He said he wanted Reno to accept full responsibility in deed, not just words. Such an assassination seemed too difficult, and he decided that since federal agents had become the soldiers, he should strike at them at their command centers. According to Mcveigh's authorized biography, he decided that he could make the loudest statement by bombing a federal building. After the bombing, he was ambivalent about his act and the deaths he caused. As he said in letters to his hometown newspaper, he sometimes wished that he had carried out a series of assassinations against police and government officials instead. Working at a lakeside campground near Mcveigh's old army post, he and Nichols constructed an anvil explosive device mounted in the back of a rented Ryder truck. The bomb consisted of about 5,000 pounds, 2,300 kilograms, of ammonium nitrate and nitromethane. On April 19, 1995, Mcveigh drove the truck to the front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building just as its offices opened for the day. Before arriving, he stopped to light a 2-minute fuse. At 9:02, a large explosion destroyed the north half of the building. It killed 168 people, including 19 children in the daycare center on the second floor, and injured 684 others. Mcveigh said that he had not known that there was a daycare center on the second floor and that he might have chosen a different target if he had known about it. Nichols said that he and Mcveigh did know about the daycare center in the building and that they did not care. Mcveigh's biographers, Lou Michel and Dan Herbeck, spoke with Mcveigh in interviews totaling 75 hours. He said about the victims, "To these people in Oklahoma who have lost a loved one, I'm sorry, but it happens every day. You're not the first mother to lose a kid, or the first grandparent to lose a grandson or a granddaughter. It happens every day, somewhere in the world. I'm not going to go into that courtroom, curl into a fetal ball and cry just because the victims want me to do that." During an interview in 2000 with Ed Bradley for television news magazine 60 Minutes, Bradley asked Mcveigh for his reaction to the deaths of the 19 children. Mcveigh said, "I thought it was terrible that there were children in the building." According to the Oklahoma City Memorial Institute for the Prevention of Terrorism, MIPT, more than 300 buildings in the city were damaged. More than 12,000 volunteers and rescue workers took part in the rescue, recovery, and support operations following the bombing. In reference to theories that Mcveigh had assistance from others, he responded with a well-known line from the film A Few Good Men, "You can't handle the truth." He added, "Because the truth is, I blew up the Murrah building, and isn't it kind of scary that one man could wreak this kind of hell?" Mcveigh's death sentence was delayed pending an appeal. One of his appeals for certiorari, taken to the Supreme Court of the United States, was denied on March 8, 1999. Mcveigh's request for a nationally televised execution was also denied. An internet company unsuccessfully sued for the right to broadcast the execution. At USP Florence and Mex, Mcveigh and Nichols were housed in what was known as Bombers Row. Ted Kaczynski, Luis Felipe, and Ramzi Youssef were also housed in this cell block. Youssef made frequent, unsuccessful attempts to convert Mcveigh to Islam. Mcveigh said, "I am sorry these people had to lose their lives, but that's the nature of the beast. It's understood going in what the human toll will be." He said that if there turned out to be an afterlife, he would improvise, adapt and overcome, noting, "If there is a hell, then I'll be in good company with a lot of fighter pilots who also had to bomb innocents to win the war." He also said, "I knew I wanted this before it happened. I knew my objective was state-assisted suicide, and when it happens, it's in your face. You just did something you're trying to say should be illegal for medical personnel." The Federal Bureau of Prisons, BOP, transferred Mcveigh from USP Florence and Max to the federal death row at USP Terre Haute in Terre Haute, Indiana, in 1999. Mcveigh dropped his remaining appeals, saying that he would rather die than spend the rest of his life in prison. On January 16, 2001, the BOP set May 16 as Mcveigh's execution date. Mcveigh said that his only regret was not completely destroying the federal building. 6 days prior to his scheduled execution, the FBI turned over thousands of documents of evidence it had previously withheld to Mcveigh's attorneys. As a result, U.S. Attorney General John Ashcroft announced Mcveigh's execution would stay for 1 month. The execution date was reset for June 11. Mcveigh invited conductor David Woodard to perform Requiem Mass music on the eve of his execution. While acknowledging Mcveigh's horrible deed, Woodard consented, intending to provide comfort. Mcveigh also requested a Catholic chaplain. His last meal consisted of 2 pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream. Mcveigh chose William Ernest Henley's poem Invictus as his final statement. Just before the execution, when he was asked if he had a final statement, he declined. J. Sawyer, a relative of one of the victims, wrote, "Without saying a word, he got the final word." Larry Witcher, whose brother died in the attack, described Mcveigh as having a totally expressionless, blank stare. He had a look of defiance and that if he could, he'd do it all over again. Mcveigh was executed by lethal injection at 7:14 a.m. on June 11, 2001, the first federal prisoner to be executed since Victor Feger was executed in Iowa on March 15, 1963. On November 21, 1997, President Bill Clinton had signed S. 923, special legislation introduced by Senator Arlen Specter to bar Mcveigh and other veterans convicted of capital crimes from being buried in any military cemetery. His body was cremated at Maddox Ryan Funeral Home in Terre Haute. His ashes were given to his lawyer, who said that the final destination of Mcveigh's remains would remain privileged forever. Mcveigh had written that he considered having them dropped at the site of the memorial where the building once stood, but decided that would be too vengeful, too raw, too cold. He had expressed willingness to donate organs but was prohibited from doing so by prison regulations. Psychiatrist John Smith concluded that Mcveigh was a decent person who had allowed rage to build up inside him to the point that he had lashed out in one terrible, violent act. Mcveigh's IQ was assessed at 126.
Every culture has its own urban legends, myths or spooky stories. I have rounded up the scariest urban legends from around the world, from Hawaii to Scandinavia to Egypt.
There are structures in the town of Kuldara that date back to the 13th century, but no one has lived there since 1825 when all its residents seemingly vanished into thin air. According to local lore, 1,000 villagers completely abandoned their home overnight, without a trace. No one knows why they left, where they went or even saw them leave. Theories as to why they left range from poisoned wells to a greedy ruler levying high taxes to a dwindling water supply, though none of those explain why the inhabitants left so suddenly. You might be wondering why no one has tried to resettle the town. That's where the legend comes in. It's said that the village chief cured the land. Apparently, anyone who tries to live there will die. The Indian Paranormal Society spent a night there and reported disembodied whispers, screams, noises are common at dark hours. Many people have witnessed apparitions, heard footsteps, experienced unusual touch and so on. The word genie is the anglicized version of the Arabic word jinn. Jinns can be good or malevolent beings. Mcveigh is one of the most famous jinns in the United Arab Emirates. She was even immortalized in a film in 2013. Her story is simple. At first, she appears as a beautiful woman to attract men. But as soon as she's reeled them in, Mcveigh changes into a terrifying figure who eats the men she's enchanted. Though it might just be a scary story to tell kids to warn them about stranger danger, there's a video that purports to be footage of one such jinn.
You might have heard of the 2015 comedy, horror hybrid film, but the real story of Krampus is just as terrifying as you'd expect. National Geographic describes Krampus as a half-goat, half-demon, horrific beast. Krampus is the bad cop to Santa's good cop. While the jolly bearded follow-up North gives the nice kids presents, Krampus aims to scare the naughty kids into behaving better by beating them with birch branches or hauling them off to hell in sacks. He's mainly a German and Austrian figure, though other countries have their own versions, and traditionally shows up on December 5th, which is known as Krampusnacht, Krampus Night. Though no one quite knows for certain, this tradition is often believed to have begun when the Moors raided European towns, kidnapping locals and selling them into slavery.
Night marches, or Huakaipo in Hawaiian, are the spirits of former ancient Hawaiian warriors who one, in life, protects Hawaii's most scared people. These people were so scared, in fact, that commoners were not allowed to look at them. If they did, they would be killed. The night marchers weren't there to harangue anyone, they were simply doing their jobs, which is why they traveled at night to avoid too many prying eyes. They continue to roam around Hawaii at night as spirits, and legend has it that if you look directly at a night marcher you will be marked for death. If you do happen to find yourself in the middle of a procession, you're supposed to lie down in the middle of the road in order to show respect.
Literally translated, Janganger means walking after death. Traditionally, a Janganger is a sort of hybrid of a ghost and a zombie, in that it had corporeal form, like a zombie, but still possesses its mind and memories, like a ghost. Jangangers are created when a dead person has unfinished business, or they were killed violently, through murder or suicide. The belief in them dates back to the Vikings when Jangangers were believed to have been relatively common.
Item, SCP-016. Object Class, Peter. Special Containment Procedures, SCP-016 is to remain within the confines of a 5x5x5, 5x5x5 meter room at all times, maintained at a temperature not to exceed 0 degrees Celsius. SCP-016 itself is to remain in the petri dish in the containment cube at all times unless directed otherwise by Level 4 or 05 personnel. Full documentation of experimentation with SCP-016 must be submitted before and after samples and duplicates of SCP-016 may be taken. Failure to follow these procedures will result in termination or reassignment as Class D personnel. Only authorized personnel may be permitted to obtain samples of and experiment with SCP-016 under BCL-5 containment conditions. If an outbreak does occur despite following the aforementioned procedures, directive-based personnel are to implement a code signal lockdown and containment plan. Infected personnel are to be terminated on site by security forces wearing standard mission-oriented protective posture, MOPP, anti-biological and anti-chemical equipment. Should the infection not be contained after 48 hours, the on-site nuclear device is to be detonated. Remaining personnel are not to be evacuated under any circumstances. SCP-016 has been shown to survive for up to 6 hours on hard surfaces, and up to several minutes in air. High-intensity ultraviolet light and high concentrations of orthophthalealdehyde solution have been demonstrated to be effective in disinfecting non-organic surfaces. Description: SCP-016 is a blood-borne pathogen recovered from a mine worker and data expunged who injured himself while working in a deep coal seam. Said wound became contaminated with coal dust from the mine, possibly infecting the worker with dormant spores. Over the next several days, SCP-016 proceeded to infect the remaining employees at the mining camp, as well as the CDC crisis team dispatched to deal with the epidemic. Foundation personnel then took over the investigation and terminated all affected personnel. Patient 0 was brought into captivity, and the mine shaft was collapsed by explosive device. SCP-016 has an incubation period ranging from 24 hours to 2 years, depending on the presence and number of other human hosts in the area. First symptoms resemble the common cold, and include itchy eyes, runny nose, coughing, and bodily aches. Phase 2 begins in 48 hours, and consists of a controlled form of hemorrhagic fever, as the organism causes a small amount of blood to become aspirated to the lungs, creating an aerosol effect. During Phase 3, the host crashes and bleeds out, bleeding profusely from every bodily orifice, including the nose, tear ducts, anus, skin pores, mouth, urethra, and, in case of females, vagina. Blood pressure skyrockets during the final stage. Hosts have been observed projectile vomiting blood to distances of over 5 meters. Should the host survive this near-total exsanguination, the pathogen will become dormant once more, returning to incubation phase. What distinguishes SCP-016 from other strains of hemorrhagic fever such as Ebola and Marburg is its unusual response to high stress. Should the subject undergo a high-stress situation, such as a life-threatening crisis, the organism will change its survival tactic from rapid reproduction to the rewriting of the host's DNA and stimulation of rapid cell division. Major physiological changes occur within the first 24 hours, with complete bodily reconstruction occurring within 2 weeks' time. Most hosts do not survive the process due to the heavy demands made on the body. An interesting side effect of the transformation is an increased aggressive urge. It is believed that this may be an attempt to maximize the spread of the virus in a manner similar to rabies. On another note, subjects who undergo bodily transformation no longer appear to exhibit SCP-016's hemorrhagic properties. However, subjects infected by transformed hosts will still undergo the normal SCP-016 infection process. Addendum: Experiment Log of SCP-016's Transformative Properties. Subject D-016-1, B-Class personnel infected by SCP-016. Upon first showing symptoms, Subjects' quarters were slowly flooded with water over a 24-hour period. SCP-016 mutated into teratomorphic state, transforming subjects' lungs into gills. Subject survived for two more weeks as SCP-016 transformed its limbs into fins, caused its eyes to atrophy, and enhanced its sense of hearing into a cetacean-type echolocation ability. Subject was terminated by draining all water from its quarters, causing it to asphyxiate. Body was subsequently cremated without autopsy. Subject D-016-2, D-Class personnel infected by SCP-016. Upon first showing symptoms, subject's quarters were slowly flooded with water over a 24-hour period. SCP-016 mutated into teratomorphic state, causing subject to undergo rapid muscular growth and increased bone growth on knuckles. Subject then attempted to escape from confinement by punching through the reinforced steel door. Subject was not successful and died by drowning. Note: same situation, two different responses. Interesting. Doctor data expunged. Subject D-016-3, D-Class personnel infected by SCP-016. Subject was previously a chemical engineer who poisoned his wife upon discovering her adultery. Upon first showing symptoms, subject's quarters were slowly flooded with water over a 24-hour period. SCP-016 mutated into teratomorphic state, causing subject to grow an unusual organ on his chest, consisting of a chamber and two separate tubes. Organ continued to take in water and swell in size, until Foundation personnel, realizing what SCP-016 may be attempting, terminated the subject by gunshot. Organ was found to contain several gas sacs filled with acetylene gas and oxygen. Subject D-016-4, D-Class personnel infected by SCP-016. Subject was told to concentrate on forming wings. No stress was applied. SCP-016 did not mutate into teratomorphic state. Subject died of exsanguination during Phase 3. Subject D-016-5, D-Class personnel infected by SCP-016. Subject was told to concentrate on forming wings and placed in an acrylic box suspended 305 meters, 1,000 feet, above a mine shaft. A timer was placed outside the box which subject was told indicated the time to release. SCP-016 mutated into teratomorphic state, causing subject to grow a tentacle-like organ on his left wrist similar to a spider's spinnerets. Subject extended said organ through one of the box's air holes and extruded a strong, silk-like substance, which it then used to secure the box to the cable. Subject was terminated when the countdown reached 0 and the bomb detonated. Footnotes 1. Due to their similarities as fatal contagions that stimulate the production of excess organs, a possible link to SCP-1801 is under investigation.
Item hash, SCP-028, Knowledge. Object Class, Safe. Special Containment Procedures. No special means are needed to contain at this time, as SCP-028 has not shown any change in size, position or shape during the entire period of its containment, but access must be restricted. Currently, SCP-028 is contained on site, as SCP-028 is not transportable by any known means. SCP-028 is sealed in a 6, 6 by 6, 6 by 3, 3 meter, 20, 20 by 20, 20 by 10, 10 foot, concrete room with a single door, with two armed personnel stationed outside. Only authorized personnel are to be allowed exposure to SCP-028, and extreme care must be taken at all times. While SCP-028 is itself harmless, the effect can be very damaging to the unprepared. See document L028-1125. Description: SCP-028 is located in an abandoned storage yard outside a copper mine in northern Michigan. SCP-028 has no detectable physical presence of any kind, but its effect occurs in a 2.1 meter, 7 foot, cube around what is commonly held as the center of SCP-028. All forms of scanning and testing in the area of SCP-028 have shown no abnormal readings. Adding or removing objects, or attempting to remove dirt from under SCP-028 has no effect in altering the size or shape of SCP-028's area of effect, nor the onset or quality of the effect. Subjects entering SCP-028 are, within 3 to 6 seconds, struck by total and complete knowledge of a subject. This knowledge is thus far completely random in both size and usefulness, and sometimes goes unnoticed for extended periods of time. More profound knowledge generally has a stronger effect, with some cases, expunged. See document L028-1125. This effect can be experienced multiple times by exiting and re-entering SCP-028, but can result in increasingly strong migraines and dizziness after two exposures. SCP-028 came to the Foundation's attention after research into news reports of a local miner who submitted a design for a cold fusion reactor to the U.S. Patent Office. Mr. reported that it just came to me, like a bolt out of the blue. News and subjects were suppressed and contained after discovery of SCP-028, and the reactor designs implemented in the containment of SCP-1995. Subsequent testing of SCP-028 has yielded mixed results. Document L028, Treble 14, Partial Information Retrieval Log for 1/5/. Note: all knowledge is perfect, total, and eidetic. Every phone book entry for New York City in 1998. How to redesign the internal combustion engine to run on human blood, using only pre-existing parts. Note: full redesign takes 4 hours, and runs at higher efficiency than gasoline. Location of keys for Obuicla saber. The proper method of care for a mole rat colony. Origin and history of 12 SCP objects. Note: the main, expunged. Family history of the Blackthorn family, located in London, England. Geological structure of the Earth beneath Greenland, including several unknown caves and, expunged. Document L028-1125, Log. E112, Subject D1182 exposed to SCP-028. Subject began to cry and went into fetal position, showing signs of high distress. Unresponsive to questioning and outside stimulus for several days. Lapsed into catatonia shortly after stating that this is not life. Subject passed into a coma and died shortly thereafter. COD was attributed to shock. E127, Agent accidentally exposed to SCP-028. Agent showed signs of sudden surprise and bemusement. When questioned, Agent requested a moment to gather my thoughts, please. After several seconds, Agent laughed, shook his head, and removed his service pistol from its holster. Agent then shot and wounded Dr. and killed Agent and before being restrained. Post-incident interrogation revealed Agent had extensive knowledge of classified Foundation activities, and several SCP objects he had not been previously exposed to, including SCP-2669. Any Foundation personnel found to have entered SCP-028's area of effect are to be detained indefinitely. Document #028-1128, Log. Experiment 189, Subject D9843 was exposed to SCP-028/03/1911-46. Examination of subject revealed abnormal respiratory actions. /03/1913-37. Questioning reveals subject had learned to recycle the carbon dioxide inside his body. /03/1917-21. Repeated attempts to teach skill to other D-class personnel failed. /03/2412-11. Subject terminated. /07/1815-03. Autopsy reveals no abnormal organ formations. /07/1818-37. Researchers' notes, Dr. seriously, how the hell did he do that?
We have all heard the tales of the Headless Horseman. The tales differ depending on what part of the world you are from. The myth has been a motif of European folklore since at least the Middle Ages. The Headless Horseman is traditionally depicted of a man upon horseback who is missing his head. Depending on the legend, he can be seen carrying his head, riding headless, or even have a carved flaming pumpkin for a head. My story tells of a young man who hears about this myth and wanted to find out for himself on whether the legend was real or make-believe. He was a real fan of myths and legends, but also believed in mass hysteria. He heard of a town where the legend was the strongest, with reports from almost all of the town folks. Researching this town and making a decision, he booked a plane ticket for the small town of Sleepy Hollow. It is told that in the town of Sleepy Hollow on All Hallows Eve, when the barrier to the afterlife is at its weakest, a horse can be heard riding in the distance. Anyone that is courageous and willing enough to go looking for this sound is greeted by the foul odor of rotten death. The odor makes the people sick to their stomach. Many run home on smelling the foul odor, but the few that do fight and walk on now resides in the city's crazy house. Upon reading this on the internet, the man got all excited, but also remembers that mass hysteria can be a real thing, and all it takes is just one person to witness the myth come alive. After 17 hours, the man had arrived at his designated airport. While walking to the main entrance, he sees his taxi driver that he ordered before you boarded the plane. Where to, said the taxi driver, to Sleepy Hollow if you may. The man got confused as the taxi man gave us this look as to say, here we go again, another one to the nut house. The man shook it off, thinking that maybe he didn't like him somehow. 30 minutes have passed and the man is now at Sleepy Hollow. The taxi drops him off at the local hotel. He pulls off laughing, leaving the man thinking, what on earth does he find funny? As he has arrived one day before All Hallows Eve, he decided that he would walk around town and get the town folks' story of the Headless Horseman. The best place he could think about going would be the local dinner in the public records house. Now at the records house, he could not find a damn thing about this legend he wants to see. Next he went to the local dinner and asked the customers what they believed in about the Headless Horseman. To his dismay, they all answered with the same output: if you go looking for the Headless Horseman, you will lose your mind and will be a forever guest in Sleepy Hollow. But not believing the locals, he wanted to find this out for himself. The man, now back at his hotel room, decides to go on his laptop computer and research the legend a little more. After all, he wanted to see if the Headless Horseman just turned up or whether a ritual would be needed to summon him. Upon researching the legend, he came upon a piece that really caught his interest, and this got him thinking. The website he visited was from the town he was now visiting. But what caught his eyes was this sentence: "To whoever processed the head of the demon on his horse, shall have total domain over his soul, and so the demon will do their bidding." After reading more into the legend and visiting a few more websites, the man decides to go to bed. After all, tomorrow night is the big night the demon is supposed to show himself. At about 11 p.m. the man gets together his stuff, camera, ghost machines, and set out into the woods. After all, the walk will take about an hour to get to the spot where the tale has been seen. After what seems to take forever, the man arrives at his destination. Now with his camera out and looking around, he cannot find nor can he hear anything. The man walks around for about 3 hours looking for any signs, but he now gives in and decides to walk back into town. Just as he packs up his stuff and starts walking, he can smell a foul odor that seems to make him heat. Now he hears the clacking of what appears to be a horse trotting. The man starts to get excited and again takes out his camera to gather evidence. After looking around for a short time, he can see what seems to be fire in the distance, but this does not make sense as fire does not spread in that way. After a few minutes the fire seems to get bigger and he can now hear the horse. His heart starts pounding hard. "I have to get out of here," he told himself, but curiosity kept him in his place. The horse got closer and closer, but the man can still not see where the horse is. He turns around and face to face, he smells the breath of the horse upon his face. Now why does a ghost concealed in this place? His curiosity got the best of him. He just had to look up. Upon looking at the headless creature upon his horse, the demon took out his sword, which seemed to burst into flame, and the last thing the man saw was the sword cutting through his neck. The sword, however, did not cut through his neck, but instead left a burned mark seared into his flesh. His mind instantly gone. He is now the newest member of the nut house at Sleepy Hollow, and that is what he shall remain for the rest of his life.
Just before dawn, on the outskirts of New York Harbor, a small sloop sailed listlessly into the bay. The ship had no crew, no lights, and a deck covered in blood. It presented a mystery to the local police, who set their detectives on the case, which led to a manhunt up the east coast of the United States in pursuit of a phantom. The police may have had a description, a name, but they had no idea of the monster they would find at the end of the trail. More than a phantom, they were chasing a legend, a man who would later become whispered about in taverns as the last pirate of New York. Albert W. Hicks, also known as Elias W. Hicks, William Johnson, John Hicks, and Pirate Hicks, was a triple murderer, and one of the last people executed for piracy in the United States. Cultural historian Rich Cohen places him as the first New York City legendary gangster figure, a bridge between the piracy of old and rise of a new gangster nation. According to Hicks' testimony, he was born in 1820 in Foster, Rhode Island. His father was a farmer who had 7 sons, of whom Hicks was the second youngest. He was known to be headstrong and a fighter. He never attended school and worked on the farm until age 15 when he ran away to Norwich, Connecticut, where he began a life of crime. Arrested for theft, he was put into jail. Biographer Rich Cohen suggests it wouldn't have been uncommon for a teenage runaway to be buggered by older inmates. Hicks escaped a number of times, but he was reapprehended and given increasingly severe sentences, including a year in solitary where Hicks said he went a little crazy. He swore vengeance against the whole human race. The account given by Hicks for the next 20 years is murder and mayhem on the high seas, the goldfields of California, throughout South America, Mexico, the South Pacific, and the Atlantic Trade Triangle. Ship mutinies and highway robberies were his main occupation. It is possible that Hicks killed hundreds of people. He and an accomplice typically killed their victims and stayed on the move, spending money on alcohol, prostitutes, and fine clothes until it ran out. He was a known raconteur, and when his confessions were published, the New York Times raised some doubt about their accuracy, but modern biographer Rich Cohen said there was evidence to support at least some of the stories. Hicks eventually washed up in New York City, at the age of 40, with a newly married wife who knew nothing of his criminal past and a young child to support. Needing money for his family, he turned to the skills he knew best. Hicks hired on as a deckhand with the oyster sloop A.E. Johnson out of New York City, which he knew to be carrying a large amount of cash for buying oysters in Virginia to be transported back to New York. There were 4 men on the boat, including Captain George H. Burr, brothers Oliver and Smith Watts, and Hicks. It was nighttime as the boat neared the Narrows. Captain Burr and Oliver retired to their quarters to sleep. Smith had night duty and Hicks joined him on deck, politely taking a turn on the wheel. Hicks saw something and pointed it out to Smith, asking what it was. Smith didn't see anything. Hicks said, "Look again." Smith turned his back. Hicks grabbed a sea axe and struck a blow to the back of Smith's head, felling him to the deck. Hearing the commotion, Oliver Watts stuck his neck out through the cabin hatchway. Hicks struck again, decapitating Watts. Hicks recalled that the body slowly sagged downward and the head rolled onto the deck, now sprayed with the blood of 2 brothers. Hicks carried the bloodied axe into Captain Burr's cabin, who was by now alert. The captain was a tall, strong man and the ensuing fight lasted a while, with Burr almost strangling Hicks to death. Eventually, Hicks managed to slash the captain with the axe, slicing off half his face, including an eyeball and nose left hanging on the axe blade. Exhausted from the struggle of killing Burr, Hicks searched the living quarters for loot. When Hicks returned onto the deck, he saw a movement and was shocked to see Smith on his feet moving towards him. He believed it might be an apparition. Hicks forced the injured man overboard, but Smith grasped a rail and hung on with a death grip. Hicks swung the axe and chopped off his fingers, which fell onto the deck. The rest of Smith slipped into the water. Hicks threw the other bodies and the axe overboard. The A.E. Johnson had been running unattended and struck another ship, the schooner J.R. Mather, breaking the Johnson's mainmast and bringing down her rigging. Hicks set out to sink the ship, with the evidence of the killings, by drilling a handful of holes through the keel. He then took the money, about $230, and the possessions of the murdered crew, and abandoned ship in a yawl, rowing for shore and landing about daybreak next to a farmer's field on Staten Island just above Fort Richmond, Battery Weed. Believing that he would not be caught, he made his way back home to Manhattan, stopping at saloons merrily drinking and making a spectacle of himself. When the abandoned but still afloat A.E. Johnson was discovered the next day by the Coast Guard, they found the deck and cabin bathed in blood, including inexplicably a set of severed fingers. The city was shocked by the gruesome scene and intrigued by the mystery of what happened. Police detectives could see that a yawl was missing and began a search for it. After a few days, a local boy led them to where it had been abandoned in some rushes. They began following a chain of witnesses who had seen a strange man carrying a large heavy sea bag. The detectives followed witness sightings all the way back to an apartment in Manhattan. Hicks learned the police were on his trail through newspaper reports and fled the city. Detectives had by now determined Hicks' identity, and they continued to follow a chain of witnesses who remembered a large man with a wife and small child taking trains and boats northward. When police found the last witness to see him, a cabbie who took Hicks to a boarding home outside Providence, Rhode Island, they surrounded the house in the middle of the night and took him captive in bed without a fight. They found in his possession Captain Burr's watch, several money bags, and a daguerreotype belonging to Watts, among other damning evidence. When the abandoned but still afloat A.E. Johnson was discovered the next day by the Coast Guard, they found the deck and cabin bathed in blood, including inexplicably a set of severed fingers. The city was shocked by the gruesome scene and intrigued by the mystery of what happened. Police detectives could see that a yawl was missing and began a search for it. After a few days, a local boy led them to where it had been abandoned in some rushes. They began following a chain of witnesses who had seen a strange man carrying a large heavy sea bag. The detectives followed witness sightings all the way back to an apartment in Manhattan. Hicks learned the police were on his trail through newspaper reports and fled the city. Detectives had by now determined Hicks' identity, and they continued to follow a chain of witnesses who remembered a large man with a wife and small child taking trains and boats northward. When police found the last witness to see him, a cabbie who took Hicks to a boarding home outside Providence, Rhode Island, they surrounded the house in the middle of the night and took him captive in bed without a fight. They found in his possession Captain Burr's watch, several money bags, and a daguerreotype belonging to Watts, among other damning evidence. Hicks soon became a legend in the New York underworld, with the help of showman P.T. Barnum. Barnum had met Hicks in prison and made a deal that would allow Barnum to take a death mask while he was still alive. In return, Barnum would give Hicks a new set of clothes, the electric blue suit he wore for the execution. Barnum used the casting to create a full-size wax statue of Hicks wearing the same clothes as when he committed the murders. The wax likeness was displayed for 10 years and seen by millions of visitors before it melted in a museum fire. Biographer Rich Cohen argues that Hicks originated a gangster clothing fashion that can still be seen in art and real life. The Hicks look of a Kossuth hat pulled low over one eye, long-tailed monkey jacket, and pumped footwear were displayed at the Barnum Wax Figure Museum, where millions saw a very bad but handsome man. This style passed from gangster to gangster and through generations as a sort of badge of association with legends of the past, eventually reaching Hollywood films of the 1930s and broader culture to the present. Hicks was hanged on Friday the 13th. There is some speculation Hicks originated or helped solidify a superstition of the day's ill luck, though there are other theories. His name became a slang gambling phrase, meaning 6 on a pair of dice, rhymes with Hicks. Henry Sherman Backus, an itinerant composer of murder ballads that romanticized crimes, dedicated a ballad titled Hicks the Pirate, sung to the traditional Irish tune The Rose Tree. Irish singer-songwriter Vincent Cross recorded a modern take on the 1860 ballad for his album The Life and Times of James the Rooster Corcoran, 2020, titled Albert W. Hicks. 8-9. The execution of Albert Hicks is dramatized in Chapter 18 of McKinley Cantor's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel Andersonville, 1955. Hicks was portrayed as a wax figure in the Twilight Zone episode The New Exhibit. In the show, wax figures in a museum come to life and commit murders when they learn their exhibit is to be shut down. Hicks is accurately dressed in a Kossuth hat and carries a sea axe. He is portrayed by the American actor, Bob Mitchell.
When I was a young teenager back in the day, I was obsessed with urban legends. I was so obsessed that I would buy magazines each week from my local corner shop. I would then cut out the pictures, stories, and make my very own scrapbook of the legends that I thought was the best. When my mates came over, they would make so much fun of me as I used to collect these stories of urban legends. I'd even go so far as to have the posters made of the ones I loved the most. My walls was full of these posters. However, one legend that stuck out to me, the one I love to read at least several times a day, was called Humans Can Lick Too, or The Hand Licker, depending on which part of the world you lived in. I even made up my own stories of this legend. I was so impressed with the story that I made several different stories and posted them just about everywhere I could on the internet, even Reddit. However, this story is a story on how I survived a night of horror with every detail restraining to every detail I have written in my stories. It looked as if someone had become obsessed with my stories and wanted to make it a reality for me. This story goes back to the summer of 2005. My parents would take one night a week where they would have a date night. As people with children know, it can be hard to have time to yourself with children. Also, you will know how children are. If they're not pestering you for something they want, then they will be wanting your attention for playtime, story reading. Even getting children to bed takes a few hours. My parents promised each other from the day the first child was born they will take one night a week where they will go and have fun with each other. You know, go for dinner, movie, or maybe just a dance. I am the oldest at the age of 17, so I was old enough to look after myself along with my younger siblings. They usually got a babysitter, but no longer did this as I was old enough now. Besides, the money they gave me I saved up each time, thinking of buying a car one day. One week this happened, they had planned to go out for a meal, the movies, and then for a dance. They wouldn't be back until the next morning. My older siblings were staying away at a friend's house. To be honest, I was actually looking forward to having the house to myself. So those of you who have siblings will understand that you can never get any time to yourself. I had a great night planned for myself. The time for their date had arrived. Don't forget to lock all the doors and windows, my parents told me as I left through the front door. Taking the words into mind, I went through the house and started to lock all the windows and making sure the doors too were locked. Now, with all the doors and windows locked, there was, however, one window left. It would have to be in the most creepiest place. I thought to myself, oh well, better get on with it. The last window was down in the basement. I hated it. It was cold and damp, not lit very well. I grabbed a torch from the drawer, turned it on, and went very cautiously down into the basement to where the window was located. I grabbed hold of the handle of the window, but it was very stiff and would not move so easily. I pulled and pulled, but it would only move about an inch. Getting fed up with the window, I looked around the basement for anything that could help me close the window. There in the corner on the shelf I saw a small can of oil. I knew that by putting oil on the hinges, and it should loosen up if I just moved the window back and forth. I did this for what seemed like 5 minutes. In the end, the window did decide to close itself, however, it would not lock. I thought to myself that it wouldn't matter, anyone that walked past the window will think it would be locked as it was now closed. Oh, how that will come back to bite me on this night. Not thinking too much into it, I knew the basement had a deadlock bolt on the door, so I decided to lock the basement door instead, thinking that would be enough, just in case someone decided to go through the basement window. Now, with everywhere locked up, I decided that I would watch a bit of TV, have a nice dinner, and then go and browse the web for any new urban legends that I have never heard of before. Before I could do any of this, I would need to feed our dog. She was a border collie, brown and white in colour. I went to the cupboard, got out her food, and gave her a generous amount in a bowl. It seemed like I was on the web for hours browsing the urban legends of how time flies by when you're having a bit of fun. It was now dark outside. Looking at the time, it read 11 p.m. Wow, that was late, I thought to myself. It was time for bed. I turned off my computer, then went to the bathroom to get ready for bed. A nice hot shower, teeth brushed, and my PJs on. I walked into my bedroom and was delighted to see the dog laying with her head just out from under my bed. She always seemed to sleep with me. I have no idea why. Maybe she liked me more than the other family members. I started to snuggle up in my bed, put my hand down near my dog so she could lick my hand. I liked it when she does this. It makes me feel safe and also assure her that I'm here and I'm fine. I kept my hand there for a few minutes before deciding that enough was enough, and it was time to close my eyes and go to sleep. Later that night I was startled awake. I don't know how or why I was, but I was. I lay there for a few minutes listening to my surroundings, surroundings, and then it hit me. I was hearing the tap drip in the bathroom, and just figured it was that awoken me. No big deal, I thought to myself, it's just the tap. I was starting to feel nervous. I put my hand back down to my dog's level so she could lick my hand. This brings me reassurance, and also I know she is there if I really need her. An hour later, I was yet again startled awake. This time I was still half asleep. I sat up in my bed and looked around the room while listening. I must have left the tap running, I thought to myself. That was however strange, as I was sure that I had turned off the tap. Then I thought to myself that maybe there was a leak with the tap. Again, I snuggled up in bed and put my hand back down to my dog's level for her to lick my hand. The next time I woke up naturally with nothing startling me awake. I looked at the time. It read 6:25. Thinking that it was now light outside and I wouldn't be able to get any more sleep, I managed to pull myself out of bed. Drawing back the curtains and looking out the window, I could see my parents' car pull into the drive. Great, I thought. I could get my dad to look at the tap and fix that drip that I've been hearing all night. Being out of bed and somewhat cold, I needed to go to the loo. I put on my slippers, opened the door, and went to the room that was the bathroom. What I saw that day when I opened the door will forever haunt me to the day I die. I fell to my knees. My parents, hearing my curdling screams, came running into their house to be by my side. They asked me, "What's wrong?" I shakily raised my arm and pointed into the shower of the bathroom. There, our beautiful collie dog hung from a hook in its tail from the curtain rail. The dog was skinned with its skin in the bath. She seemed to be gutted with all the contents too in the bath. On the mirror there was a message that shook me to the core, turning me white as a ghost. It read, "Humans can lick too." The thought that someone was in my room under my bed while licking my hand turned my stomach. I couldn't take it anymore and I had to own up. I pushed past my parents and ran to the toilet and let loose. I didn't want to because of the scene in the bathroom, but I couldn't help it. My parents called the police that day. They came out, took a statement from me. They said that due to every window and door being locked, the only other way they could have gotten in was through the basement window. However, what startled me the most was, when did this person break into our home? As when I closed the basement window, I also deadbolted the door leading to the basement, but I didn't quite trust leaving the window closed. My parents never left me alone again. When they went out, they made sure that I either go to my friend's house for the night. If not at my friend's house, then I will go and stay at a relative's. My parents bought the house up for sale that year. We couldn't live in the house anymore, knowing that someone was there. The house sold quite quickly, and we moved into a new house within 6 months of selling the house. Okay guys, that was the urban legend Humans Can Lick Too. If you enjoyed this video, then please do leave a like, don't forget to comment, and for all more videos, don't forget to subscribe. Until the next time, see you then. Bye bye!
Item hash, SCP-024. Object class, Euclid. Special containment procedures. Due to its nature, SCP-024 cannot be moved to a secure location, so security measures must be placed on site. To conceal its location, 5 identical-looking replicas have been erected around SCP-024. A tight security perimeter must be maintained around SCP-024's compound at all times, with separate security teams guarding SCP-024 and its replicas. None of the security teams, except for team leaders, will be informed of the location of SCP-024. SCP-024 must be secured with magnetically sealed blast doors and reinforced, armored walls to prevent unauthorized entry. Under no circumstances can any security or research personnel enter SCP-024. Only D-Class personnel are allowed entry and strictly for research purposes only. All researchers are to observe and experiment with SCP-024 from the Remote Observation Lab. Any personnel attempting to leave the remote observation lab or enter SCP-024 without prior approval from a Level 4 researcher must be immediately apprehended, with termination authorized. Should containment be breached, or SCP-024's true nature compromised, then the entire compound must be destroyed via specialized demolition charges planted throughout the compound. Description: SCP-024 is an abandoned sound stage that was once owned by Data Expunged. However, SCP-024 itself had been abandoned since Data Expunged, and it is unknown whether its special properties manifested before or after its abandonment. SCP-024 is located in the heart of Data Expunged, and was initially discovered when a group of teenage youths broke into the abandoned compound. The testimony of the lone winner when she turned herself into the police was enough to have Foundation assets mobilized to contain SCP-024. Upon entering SCP-024, visitors are immediately greeted by an anonymous announcer, who communicates via intercom and is able to hear and comprehend the voices of people within SCP-024. The announcer will inform the contestants that they are about to take part in a game show in which the winners will win fabulous prizes, but will also warn that the game will be extremely hazardous, and that the losers will never leave SCP-024. It is at this point the announcer presents the choice of whether to stay or leave SCP-024. Contestants who accept will continue to participate in the game, while those who decline are immediately expelled from SCP-024. Contestants that win the game or decline to participate may never enter SCP-024 again, as entry is denied by an impenetrable, invisible barrier. It is then that the contestants are led to the actual game. The style, composition, and appearance of the game always changes in every individual playthrough, but the game is always centered around a long, elaborate obstacle course that the contestants must navigate through. The rules also vary. Some playthroughs may only allow a single winner, while others encourage the creation of teams to win the game. More often than not, the obstacles seen in these games range from incredibly benign to extremely hazardous and life-threatening. As the contestants attempt to negotiate the course, the announcer will continuously update their status and actively participate in the game, often giving advice, conversing with contestants, and adding new rules. As the game progresses, the obstacles become significantly more dangerous and difficult to overcome, and it is not surprising to have the entire pool of contestants succumb to the rigors of the obstacle course. If such an event happens, the announcer will express sadness at the lack of a winner and SCP-024 will shut down, resetting only when a new batch of contestants enter. Any attempts to break the rules, such as assaulting other contestants and deliberately bypassing obstacles, are met by extreme violence. The announcer will call out the offending contestant, who will be quickly and forcefully ejected from the course by studio guardians. These studio guardians will immediately materialize within SCP-024 when called upon by the announcer and disappear when not needed. The contestant will never be seen again. When a winner is declared, he or she will receive a random grand prize. Any contestants that have survived the course but failed to win are immediately declared losers by the announcer. The lights will switch off, and the winner will immediately appear outside of SCP-024 with her prize, while the losers completely disappear. However, the most mysterious aspect of SCP-024 is that after every game, a VHS tape or DVD will appear in the mailbox outside of SCP-024's main entrance. This recording is a complete record of the entire game that was previously played. Even the winners have claimed that they had never seen any cameras or recording devices inside SCP-024. Also, more strangely, a live studio audience can be seen in the background cheering on the contestants. Again, winners have claimed not to have seen a live studio audience while inside SCP-024. Addendum 1. So far, the list of prizes awarded to winners has included, but is not limited to, cash prizes, electronics, various consumer goods, cars, collectibles, full paid vacations to various countries, data expunged. Close examination of these prizes have confirmed that they are completely genuine, and possess no unusual abilities or characteristics whatsoever. There appears to be no consistent pattern for what the prizes will be. Addendum 2, in an attempt to track where the losers are taken, GPS locator beacons were planted on subjects D124 through D135 when Group D245 was sent into SCP-024. When the losers were taken away, all signals from the beacons were lost. Whether this is because the beacons were destroyed, or because the losers were taken to an area that cannot be located via GPS is currently unknown. Addendum 3, the announcer living within SCP-024 appears to be sentient and aware of events that take place outside of the compound. During the test of Group D523, which consisted only of doctored data expunged, the announcer instead engaged in a conversation with doctored data expunged. Analysis of the conversations have shown that the majority of the subjects are centered around pop culture and information distributed through television, implying that SCP-024 somehow is able to access and interpret television signals. Cutting all power and signal lines, as well as removing any potential wireless receiving equipment on SCP-024, does not affect SCP-024 in any way. When it became clear that no other contestants would participate, the announcer kindly asked Dr. Data Expunged to leave SCP-024 and suggested he return with more contestants. Addendum 4, the studio guardians that the announcer uses to enforce the rules vary in appearance every game, just like the course. If they appear, the guardians will always be dressed in a manner that matches with the theme of the obstacle course. The only common attributes all guardians share are the possession of humanoid appearance, ability to suddenly appear and disappear, superhuman strength, and face-concealing masks or headgear. However, winners have claimed that the guardians have no apparent shape or form inside SCP-024, instead appearing as huge, shadowy figures that engulf the offender. Ever since the phone was invented in 1876, there have been reports of all different numbers that was supposed to be haunted, or if you call them, then you would get a very airy answer on the other end telling you that you would have so many days left to live. Think of it like the Ring movie, you watch the video and then your phone rings telling you that you have 7 days to live. Anyway, back to topic. There is one such number out there that has now become some king of challenge, especially to the YouTube community. They would call the number and you can hear creepy things in the background and other noises, but when you call the number back again, it doesn't seem to work. What makes things worse, the damn number don't even show on your phone bill. I have read and watched many stories like this, thinking, no way is this true. One such article I came across was in the local newspaper. A woman breastfeeding her child got 48 messages, all the messages was from the same person. This person name so happened to be Satan. In these messages, it just repeated the same message: you have 3 days to die. All these messages came after she missed one phone call from this number. I didn't believe in this. I thought this was made up by some person looking to get famous on YouTube, and then it became one of these so-called challenges that these YouTubers would do for their viewers. Well, that wasn't till about 2 days ago, that story changed my mind. You see, I was with a few of my mates driving down to the drive-thru. We was about halfway there when I got a phone call. I looked at the number but was shocked at what number I saw. The number on my phone came up as 666, 666, 6666. I thought to myself, really, some phone company actually gave this number to a person who asked for it. I showed my friends who started laughing and again couldn't believe the number that came up. My friends told me to answer the phone and put it on to speaker, so this is what I did. I must admit, what I had next did indeed really creep me out, but my friends just kept on laughing as if they had set up the prank themselves just to scare the living daylights out of me.
You will die in 3 days.
But my friends just kept on laughing as if they had set up the prank themselves just to scare the living daylights out of me. There seemed to be an echo on the other end of the phone call, static with someone telling me that I would die in 3 days' time. The phone hung up. I looked towards my mates whom went from laughing out loud to now giggling under their breath. Can you believe the nerves of some people? I told them as I continued to stare at the screen of my phone. One of my mates told me that I should ring the number back and give them a what for. The other friend agreed, and I must admit, I had to do this as I was left a little shaken. I went to my call history to call back the number but was shocked to find that the number that called me was not even in the call history. Luckily enough, the number itself was quite easy to remember, so I inputted the number into my phone and pressed the call button. I shit you not, if I was freaked out before then, right now, I am shitting bricks, for you see. The only thing I got back from that call was that the number was not recognized. They're whispered around campfires and passed down from generation to generation. They spark fear in the hearts and minds of children and adults alike. Their subjects take many shapes, be they bloodthirsty creatures of the night, vengeance-seeking ghouls, or sinister vortices. And each time they are told, the terror spreads. America is a country rich in folklore, a place where cautionary tales have always been mixed into the pot and sprinkled into our collective nightmares. Yet some of our nation's eeriest and most persistent stories, whether because they're rooted in community lore or used as means to synthesize local tragedy, don't travel far. Never fear, or actually, please do fear. We've tracked down the creepiest urban legends in all 50 states, and the macabre bunch of stories is certain to freak you out, no matter where you live. This eerie playground adjacent to Maple Hill, Huntsville's oldest cemetery, doesn't just have an eerie nickname for fun. The playground was presumably designed to entertain kids while their parents visited the graves of loved ones. Legend has it, though, that the spirits of children who've been buried in the cemetery since the first grave was dug there in 1822 come out to play at night. The living has observed orbs of light going down the slide, seen swings moving on their own, and even heard giggling. Creepier still, some say the spirits include victims of a rash of child murders that happened in the 60s when bodies were rumored to have been found in the area that now houses the playground. Where it came from, the playground itself wasn't opened until 1985, so you can imagine how much pent-up energy the tiny spirits had after 163 years without a slide. In 2007, the city tried to raise the park to make more room for graves and removed the slides and swings overnight. After public outcry, it was replaced with more modern equipment, making it slightly less creepy to look at, and also probably resulting in some happier ghosts, encompassing an area ranging from near Juneau in the southeast to the northern Barrow region to the western metropolis of Anchorage. Alaska's answer to the Bermuda Triangle is comprised of some of the most barren wilderness in the U.S., and it apparently craves souls. More than 20,000 people have gone missing without a trace in the area during the past half-century alone. Are they being consumed by mythological beings like the beastly Keelut or the ghoulish kidnapper Kalupalik, lost on extreme hikes, or simply vanishing into a dark vortex? Nobody knows, though it's not for lack of trying. When the government lost House Majority Leader Hale Boggs' Cessna to the Triangle in 1972, a massive search turned up tons of conspiracy theories, but nobody's. Where it came from, the area has been associated with evil spirits, and Tlingit lore for centuries attributed trickster demons for luring people to an icy death. Others believe the area exists amid an electromagnetically influenced vile vortex. Still, others think it's a Darwinian result of explorers taking on nature. Regardless, the area continues to claim people, and underneath that massive blanket of snow and rock likely lies one of the largest and best preserved mass graves in the world. It's easy to feel uneasy while driving through the desolate desert roads of Arizona, especially at night, and particularly so when you hear a short burst of taps on your window while cruising at 60 miles per hour and turn to see the shape-shifting, mutilated, half-human creature responsible for the high-speed interruption. Relax, it's only trying to rip the flesh off your bones. This legend is so ingrained in Arizona culture that, when a Navajo woman was found brutally murdered in Flagstaff, the accused killer's defense in court was that the attack could have only been perpetrated by a skinwalker. There's even a defined and well-documented portion of the state known as Skinwalker Ranch where you are most likely to see one of the creatures. Not that you'd actually want to. The Skinwalkers, like so many ancient American urban legends, have roots in Native American folklore. While it's fairly hard to gather specific details, as speaking of potentially sinister legends is seriously taboo in Navajo culture, it is understood that what non-Navajos refer to as skinwalkers are witch doctors who have become an evil reflection of everything the Navajo Nation values. Basically, they are men who've transformed into malevolent, murderous creatures that have no qualms using their spiritual powers to kill. Navajo medicine men are trained to learn both good and evil aspects of their power, and skinwalkers are those who have turned to the dark side. The name sounds kind of goofy, or actually even kind of like goofy. But if you find yourself at 65 Mulberry Street, in the middle of the minuscule Arkansas town of Quitman, you won't laugh if you see the hulking outline of a 300-pound half-man, half-beast, complete with glowing animal eyes, glaring out of the windows. Walk quickly, as he has been known to chase people down his street, biting at their heels, kind of like a dog, actually. This is actually the rare urban legend where the story behind the story ends up being even creepier than the folklore. Gerald Bettis, the only son of the Bettis family of 65 Mulberry, was always a problem child. But not in the cute, Junior Healy way. Bettis would collect and torture animals, hence the dog boy moniker, before turning his sociopathic focus to his elderly parents, allegedly imprisoning them in their own home and potentially even murdering his father. Eventually, Bettis would be imprisoned for growing marijuana on his back porch and would die in a state penitentiary in 1988 of a drug overdose. Located near LA between Whittier and City of Industry, Turnbull is a 49,000-acre smorgasbord of nightmare fuel set amid the scenic hills. Do you want your scares rooted in American history? The natives called it Hutungna, or the place of the devil, where the ghosts of those slain for not converting to Christianity dwell alongside witches and Satanists, who reportedly used the place to sacrifice children, whose spirits now walk the canyon and dangle from trees. They're joined by the ghosts of 21 kids who perished in a plane crash back in '52. Allegedly, as there's no existing record of it. Then there are the remains of the old insane asylum that came back to life to kill a teen in the '60s via a long dormant electrical wire. There are cults, alien encounters, gravity hills. It goes on and on. Basically, if it's something that gets under your skin, there's a story about it happening in this seemingly cursed canyon. The place's evil vibes date back centuries, though it wasn't until the site was established as a fur trapping site in 1845 that things started getting really intense, with word of the site's terrors traveling far and wide and making it a place visited as much for its beauty as morbid curiosity. For 11 horrifying miles, Riverdale Road near Thornton, Colorado is crammed with enough horrifying legends to bring even the bravest paranormal investigator to his knees, from a ghostly runner attacking parked cars on Joggers Hill to various demons and even a phantom Camaro revving up and down the winding road. But the gates of hell seems the epicenter. The physical iron gates are now gone, but what remains is the partial shell of an old mansion where a madman supposedly burned his wife and children alive. Left behind are the barren, charred plot of land, and a white-clad woman who wanders the area. She's joined by the ghosts of slaves supposedly hanged from the now-charred tree. Go ahead and run away when you see something creepy like an ethereal pack of dogs. You're probably just going to bump into something worse, possibly hell, a portal to which some belief is here.